Was Paul Heyman a genius or not a genius? Because that's always people are like, yes, he is, but then there's always a caveat. What did you think about Paul?
Well, it's funny in that again, I would if I won't use that name, I still think he was brilliant. It's just I don't know if being smart enough to hide weaknesses and accent strengths should be given the genius moniker. It's just
That's
for
right.
some reason 90% of the damn wrestling industry isn't smart enough to do that. Like Paul was brilliant at looking at someone and finding the aspect of them that is best marketed to get them over. And in that regard, if you want to throw the genius moniker at him, I'm certainly not going to argue with you. Where I think so many others in the wrestling business, they have a vision of what they want, and they're more apt to stick that round hole in their square peg, so to speak, or the round peg in the square hole, where Paul Heyman will look at you and figure out what shape you are, and then they'll shove you in the hole that fits. And I think that's where Paul's genius is, that again, he got more out of less than I think anyone. And again, part of it was necessity because he obviously didn't have the budget to just pick who he wanted. He had to take who was available, but he would always find a way and find a strength. And I've used the analogy before. It's like so many wrestling promoters will see the cloud in the brightest sky, and Paul will find the smallest silver lining of the darkest cloud. And where many promoters will be that, God damn it, this glass is 10%, this glass is 10% empty, where Paul will find a glass and go, damn it, it's 5% full. It's like, we got a drink here.
Right.
And I think that is Paul's genius, that he will find something. And even just, and again, I don't know this for a fact, but I assume it's the case, and I'm fairly certain. It's, again, especially when you first meet me, I've always been a shyer, more reserved, quiet person. I like my solitude.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm around people more, I loosen up and I'm a completely different person. And it's funny because every territory I ever went to, they all have well, we brought you out of your shell. And it's like, no, I do this everywhere I go. It's just when I first show up, I'm a little quieter.
Right.
But where Paul was, and again, maybe he was lucky, but I knew Chris Candido from Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We not only worked together, but we lived in the same apartment complex. We went to the gym together. We were pretty tight. So when I came to ECW, and again, part of it I think was on the recommendation of Chris Candido, when I was in the locker room with Chris, I was comfortable. And it's like I joke and rib with Chris, and I'd have that smart ass personality stuff that I had in ECW. But when I wasn't with Chris, I was, again, my more quiet, reserved person. And I think Paul saw that. So what was my first program on TV? Well, I'll put him out there in the ring with Chris Candido so he can be the guy I see in the back that's got personality. He can do that out there. And the program with Chris really helped bring me out of my shell as a character on television. And again, Paul saw little bits and things and went, man, I can do something with that. And again, the original, and this is, I think, also Paul's brilliance. And again, I don't know if it still is, but he used to use the word pencil in his email address. I won't give the whole thing out, but well, it's the old school term, right? The booker is the pencil. And I think Paul was, again, brilliant in that. And again, I don't know if this is why it was called the pencil, but it's why I say it was called the pencil, because you don't want to book an ink, because you always have to be able to rub stuff out and change. And Paul was really good at having a vision. We'll go here, but he always kept branches open. And that's something that he taught me as a booker, in that when you make your plan, make sure there's exits along the road. So if the crowd goes different, it's like, go that way. And the original triple threat prospect that I did, I was originally just supposed to turn heel enough so that the ECW audience would embrace me as a babyface. Chris and Shane were going to be the heels out of it, but he wanted to bring me out of my shell, give me a little bit of an attitude with that prospect heel run. But when Chris and I split, I was going to be the babyface. That was the plan.
Right.
And we were half, 2/3 of the way through the program. And Paul just comes in and sits down and goes, "Hate to tell you this, Chris, but you're going babyface." And Chris was like, "What? I don't want to go babyface." He's like, "I'm just reading the crowd. They're getting more into Lance as a heel. He's the one that's going to be the heel in this." And Chris was like, "Crap." I'm like, "Okay." And it just went that way. And then, Tammy came back from WWE, which gave Candido even more of a baby face because she was so popular in ECW that it was like, no, this is going to work. And Paul got us to our destination. We ended up having to take a completely different road. And again, I think that's a lot of Paul's brilliance in that he isn't arrogant enough to think that this is my plan, that's what we'll do, and this is the way they will react. He has an idea, he thinks it will work, he figures this will get a reaction, but he will always listen and he's always willing to fine tune. And because he's also very smart, it's never an abrupt fine tuning. So you never think it feels like he had to change his plan. It's like, he just makes subtle changes. And if I'm not here telling you this, you'd go, oh, hey, this was the plan all along. He did this. Lance ended up the heel. They had this feud. And it's like, hey, perfect. But it wasn't the original plan. He was just smart enough to think on his feet and adjust.
I always thought he was great at when he'd bring in like legends or big names, like how to use them, but get his talent over. Like I know Bam Bam was there for an extended period of time, but man, Bam Bam got over Shane, he got over RVD, got over Ted. You know what I mean? All these guys he would get over. Funk and Funk would get over. Like he was perfectly knew how to utilize the big name to get over his guys.
Yeah, and then probably the real genius part of Paul Heyman is in his ability, and again, it because he'll just babyface the shit out of everybody. The ability to convince you to do what he needs to get done. Like I think a lot of promoters wouldn't have been able to necessarily convince all of these names and talents that come in to do what he needed them to do to get over his own talent. But Paul is also very persuasive. And he's done that. Now, granted, you mentioned Bigelow. It's like, I'm a big fan of Bigelow. I worked with him in Japan as well as ECW. And Bammer was always about doing what was right long term. So that was a no brainer. But yeah, when you consider the importance of Bam Bam putting over RVD and then the program with Taz. And again, I was there with the part of the, putting him as part of the triple threat and Shane getting that win. It's like he gave a lot of guys, a big step up.
Huge, for sure. Now, a lot of issues with Paul, though, like, okay, he's great creative. It might be opposite business wise and money wise. Did you have like money issues with him? Like so many other guys have said, like, oh, I didn't get paid or bounce checks. Was that an issue with you? And did that lead you to want to leave?
Well, I did leave because of the financial issues in ECW. Now, again, I don't think it's fair to say Paul was a bad businessman because I don't know if any businessman could have gotten ECW to that point and kept it all profitable and above board and making it. Now, I did have issues in that I think I only had one check bounce. No, it would have been three because, and this is where I felt that I had the ability and the leverage to go elsewhere if I wanted to. And I had a good relationship with Paul. And when there started being check issues, I was actually in the process of negotiating a contract with him. But one of the clauses, if you will, things I want to put in my contract was if a check bounces, he had, I think, 30 days to make good on or whatever was his thing. But I'm like, that's fine if you want that in there, but I want a 3 strikes, you're out. Because there's no way I'm going to stay here if every single check could always be, 4 weeks late.
Right.
He said, yeah, no problem. And when I told him that and put my foot down, my check was FedEx to my house every week and it always cashed. So I was never behind in my pay. But when he did hit the third time it happened, I told him, it's like, I'm terminating. We were only under a verbal because we hadn't actually worked out all the details to the contract, but we were working under the agreement of it verbally. And I just called him and said, consider this my verbal termination of my contract. You've bounced 3 checks. I said, I'm not quitting, but I am no longer under contract and obligated to stay here. And again, that may have been the point that the check started getting FedEx to my house. So at that point, I was never behind in my pay, but I realized that ECW was struggling or going the wrong direction financially. So at that point, I started looking at my options and reaching out with, through a few friends of mine, with let people know that I would be interested in other offers. And I got a pretty good offer pretty quick from WCW. And then again, I kept Paul in the loop the whole time when I was talking to WCW, because again, I had a good relationship with him, respected him. And it's like, I'm talking with them. He's like, okay. And I agreed to a deal with them. He's like, fine. When are you finishing up here? I'm like, well, I've got the pay-per-view with Justin coming up. Once I put him over the pay-per-view, I don't see why there's any reason to stay longer. And he said, okay. So we did the pay-per-view and then I left.
Which is, I guess, you're right to do that. I mean, if it's not going to get paid, you're wrestling, you're on his program, every right to get out of there and leave. Very smart on your part to have a part of the contract too.
Well, yeah, and granted, we never ever got around to signing the damn thing, but it was a case of, again, I was, the breadwinner of my family, and I had 2 kids at that point. Just had the second one like just right before that. So it's like I had to look out long term for my family, and since I felt I had options to go elsewhere, it's like I had to take them. And Paul seemed to understand that. And to this day, Paul and I are friends, so there was no bad feelings on any front whatsoever. Now, technically, I didn't get my last check after I left, but I figured that was. And again, I don't even hold Paul. I don't hold any bad will towards Paul on that front, in that I realize that the company's in bad shape. There's people here not getting paid, and I'm going to a really good financial situation. Me losing that last check really didn't hurt me at all. So had I fought Paul and managed to get him to give me that last check, it's like someone else in the ECW roster is not going to get paid.
Right. True.
And it's like, okay, starting next week, I start getting a really great weekly check from this other company. So I just, you know what? I loved my time there. I loved Paul. It's like, I'm not fighting over a check.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.